have Justice Ramkumar sir here and myself Shyam and Prem are here. We just thought that the audio and video is okay before letting in the other participants. It's perfectly okay.
Well, good morning, friends.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I am sorry for being late by a few minutes.
Not at all. Not at all.
Technical difficulties.
You are not late.
Well, I wish you all the best. Of course, in the hard times of COVID, when we cannot physically see each other. I have special affection for Kerala for more than one reasons. Number one, of course, as we know that it is God's own land, so everybody wants to be closer to God. And personally, I must inform you that I have a couple of reasons why I have special connection with Kerala. My wife belongs to Ernakulam district, and we have been together for almost half a century now. And more importantly, I have been very closely associated with the giant jurist of the country ever produced, that is Justice V.R. Krishna Iyer. I have been close to him for the past almost 30 years till his demise, right from the time when he relinquished his office as a Supreme Court judge in 1980. And I have spent many days on MG Road, Sadgamaya, which is the dwelling place of Justice V.R. Krishna Iyer. So I have been lucky to have his association for almost 3 decades. And that has given me a lot of knowledge and material about our criminal justice system. I think I have no words to express my gratitude to the late soul of Justice V.R. Krishna Iyer. Now, friends, today's subject being criminal investigation and criminal trial. You see, the subject is too vast. As a matter of fact, even criminal investigation by itself would consume more than the requisite time that we have. In any case, I will try to be as brief as possible, but I would try to cover up the most important aspects of our criminal justice system as a whole. It is with a deep sense of regret that I tell you that as your lawyers, we all believe that we also owe a duty to a civil society, our civil society, of ensuring that the civil society is kept free of crimes, or at least the crimes are kept contained under check, because crimes are being committed, as we all know, as a student of history and law, that crimes are being committed for various reasons from times immemorial. And it is impossible to expect that a society would be totally free from crime. But we must minimize crimes and ensure that people in a democracy like ours are able to lead their life happily, with sense of dignity and with sense of security. Now, this particular aspect of the matter, that every Indian citizen, we are 135 crore plus, I believe today, every Indian citizen, and more particularly the weaker Indian citizen, is assured that he also has constitutional right with him of living a dignified life, a happy life, and a secured life. Now, to secure life of a weak person in a civil society is the paramount duty of the state. The state is under an obligation to ensure that Article 21, vis-a-vis every individual citizen of the country, is taken care of, and right to life and personal liberty is not a mere paper tiger. Now, I have in my parliamentary speeches on the floor of the House, as also in my suggestions during various meetings of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Law and Justice for almost 5 years, have made lots of suggestions. But I'm sorry that those suggestions could not become laws, or are not implemented for certain hazards and certain other problems, political reasons, and so many things are there. But let me share with you that what are the priorities and what are the what is the duty of a lawyer in this country who is the officer of the court. Now, we should understand that a lawyer succeeds in his ambition to become a successful lawyer, not merely by making name or money, but what is important for him, for his conscience satisfaction, is that he has been instrumental in ensuring justice to those who are deprived, those who cannot get their dues. Now, crimes are committed in our society, and the crimes are, as we all know, as criminal law practitioners particularly, that there are varied types of crimes which are being committed day in and day out, and those crimes are tried to be identified. And whenever an incident of crime occurs anywhere within the country, then there are, according to me, there are three important questions that need to be answered. Number one, why is the crime committed? What is the motive for the crime? And number two is that how is the crime committed? The incident as it occurs, whether it's a case of murder or rape or anything of that kind, or even cheating, how the crime has been committed, that needs to be known. And last but not the least, the crime is committed by whom? And one who has committed the crime deserves to be punished. Now, if those who commit crime go scot-free, it sends a wrong message to the society. And it also contributes to escalation of crime charts. And therefore, as a student of law, we have learned that there are deterrent punishments also provided. And we have to see to it that the person who has committed crime pays a heavy price so that he does not think of doing it again. Of course, we have reformative theory of punishment, which of course seeks to make the offender change his mind and change his actions so that he doesn't repeat the same offense over again. But then, let me tell you that when we are talking about criminal investigation and how are we having our criminal investigation system, how successful it is, or how what are the lacunae or shortcomings in criminal investigations in the present scenario. We are watching these days, and practically not just lawyers, but even common people. We are watching on televisions, the media, very excited whenever any crime takes place. And they keep on considering it as their august duty to keep on informing people with regard to the crime, details of the crime, etc., etc. But in their such duty, they must also understand that their rights to expression, rights to publicize certain things are also required to be regulated. You see, they must not get so excited as to keep on saying something which is in the nature of judgment, in the nature of predictions, in the nature of speculation or guesswork. Because we have been seeing number of cases in recent times also. I would not name any particular case to avoid controversy, but I must tell you that important cases of public interest are being discussed on television, debates by anchors, by newsreaders, and I'm sorry to say that at times they cross lines, and their act or their conduct affects the administration of justice adversely. I will give a brief example because there is very little time for me to come to main subjects also. For example, we have been watching very often, several TV channels are taking pride in saying that when the investigation is ongoing, assuming that there is a case of murder, and it's a widely publicized case because probably the suspect is some celebrity or the suspect is some politician or something of that kind. Now, in that case, media believes that it is their right and they can always inform people about things which are happening in the investigation room. I think this is no service. This is rather disservice to the administration of justice. I'll tell you how. Now remember, when the criminal investigation in a serious crime is begun, and the investigating officer is trying to collect evidence from various quarters, because the evidence, as we all know, can be oral evidence through witnesses, eyewitnesses, indirect witnesses. Then it could be evidence in the nature of documentary evidence. Then it can be oculary, it can be medical experts evidence, medical experts evidence, forensic evidence, etc., etc. So the law casts a duty on the investigating team to very delicately, without any hindrance, without any adulteration, collect evidence so that a trial can take place on the basis of material that is collected, and ultimately justice is done, both to the victim, to the society, and also to the culprits, the offenders. But unfortunately, through media, many times the case gets polluted. I'll give you one example as to how media is causing disservice. When the investigation is going on, as lawyers we know, and more particularly those who are practicing in criminal trial courts, those who are appearing for bail for their respective clients, those lawyers would appreciate what I'm trying to convey. Number one, that when the investigation is going on, and suppose you are defending a suspect, the suspect is brought to the court, you would ask for first bail and thereafter fair trial. Now, even when you are arguing for bail, you have no access to the statements of witnesses, to the panchanamas, to the medical reports. You have no access to such investigating documents until the challan is filed. You have to make your submissions. Case diary is presented by the investigating officer to the learned judge. The learned judge would have access to it, but he will say that you have no access according to law. But media has access. I'm sorry to say, how does media have access? And if media has access, through media, everyone, including the suspect, has access. Now, this would mean disservice to the procedure. This would mean that we are violating the criminal justice system by releasing or publicizing such material in investigation which is required to be kept under wraps. Secrecy is the hallmark of a successful and fair investigation. Please, I would request the officers also, whereas they belong to CBI, they belong to local police, they belong to ED, they belong to any other agency. They must not release such part of investigation to media, which invariably they do. That is how media lays hand on it and then makes it public. It also affects identification parade. You see, if the culprit is unknown, and if identification parade has to play a very important role in ultimate fixing of identity of the culprit, then the whole purpose of parade is lost if the photo of the accused person or suspect who is arrested is shown on television. These are all factors which are disadvantages to the fair system of investigation. When an officer is collecting evidence, he must have a few qualities. According to me, the first quality that an investigating officer in a crime has to be that he has to be honest. Honesty is paramount. He should understand the august duty to the society, to the system that he has to discharge. He has only 1 point program, and that 1 point program is to trace the truth. Every criminal investigation is the quest for truth. You have to arrive at truth. You have to rebuild the scene of occurrence. You have to go as closer to the event as possible by your wit, by your intelligence, by your honesty, by your faithfulness to law, by your obedience to law. But unfortunately, that's not happening. In our system, we are finding that the investigation officers do not enjoy 100% confidence of either the victims of the crime or the society. Sometimes powerful suspects or powerful accused are in a position to get the whole thing manipulated, get the whole thing derailed, and then if the beginning direction is wrong, you will never reach the destination of truth. How do you arrive at truth? You arrive at truth, first you have to be honest. Number two, you have to be professional. Professional in the sense that you should know that you are guided by the Code of Criminal Procedure, you are guided by the Constitution of India, you are guided by various pronouncements of your conduct as to how the investigation should be conducted, how the evidence is to be collected. You will have to, as an investigating officer, you will have to ensure that what material you collect will be sustained in the court of law when the trial takes place. You must not make a fool of yourself by with your imagination or with your certain material that may flow in outside the boundaries of the legal parameters. And then if you are influenced and then you take a side way, then you may never reach the destination. Why are cases failing? Not many cases are failing. There are a number of reasons for failure of cases, because the number of cases that succeed or the number of cases that fail, if you see, definitely it is more than 50% cases get acquittal. And acquittal is for there are a number of factors that contribute for acquittal of cases, and among such factors, one is the improper investigation. Investigation, if it is done honestly, if it is done professionally, if it is done intelligently, if it is done as per the guidelines of the law and the system, then probably you will have a very strong case. If you believe that, yes, you are going in the right direction, your query or your quest for why the crime was committed, your quest for as to how the crime was committed, and your quest as to who committed the crime, must end up in a successful identification of the offender, so that you place him before the court with substantive material, with believable material, which would stand the scrutiny of cross-examination and also the learned judge's test. Now, criminal investigation, therefore, matters a lot, because ultimately justice is done by the presiding officer, who is supposed to be demigod, who is supposed to be delivering justice to everyone who is before him. There are three parties. Number one is the aggrieved people against whom the offense is committed. Number two, the state and the society, which is also equally important. And number three is the accused, who is brought before him. And if an accused is innocent, he should not be wrongly convicted. So the judge has august duty of ensuring these three sides of the whole trial that he would be conducting. Once the investigation gets over, naturally the case lands in the court of law for trial. Now, we have number of shortcomings in our system which needs to be corrected. I have suggested in the parliament that, well, question of liberty also is very lightly taken. People are languishing in prison as suspects for very, very long time, for weeks, months, and sometimes years, and at times even decades, which is unfortunately giving a very bad reflection of our criminal justice system. Why does a criminal trial take so long? Why decades? Why from the date of occurrence of the crime till at least the trial court winding up its trial and deciding about the guilt or otherwise of the suspect or the accused? It should not take so long, which unfortunately is taking. So where is the flaw? I think we will have to have a relook at the entire system from the date of occurrence, the date of registration of crime, which may be soon on that day itself or soon thereafter, till the pronouncement of judgment in the trial court. It is divided into two compartments. First compartment is that of investigation part. The second compartment is that of trial part. Now, unfortunately, investigation is regulated by the provisions of the code by saying that, well, if the accused is in custody, then certainly the police officers do not get unlimited time to file challan, because they have 60 days or 90 days as prescribed. But if the accused is on bail, we have seen that for a long, long time, the investigating officer does not bother. The police say that, all right, the accused is on bail. The court also does not bother much. But even if the accused is on bail, the stigma of accusation on his head continues, which is a negativity in a civil society. Suppose you are charged for some offense and you are on bail. So people would feel that, well, you are an accused in certain crime. Although you are on bail, your liberty is restored to you, your bail is granted to you, but still, you see, people believe that you are a person suspect. So therefore, that is a kind of a disadvantage in civil society to a respectable person. That must be appreciated. Therefore, the trial, the investigation and the trial must wind up at the earliest. I am sorry to find that in other countries where we go, we find, I have had the experience of visiting several countries in as far as criminal matters are concerned. I don't find that any country has such long a period for determination of guilt or otherwise of a crime since the date of occurrence till the trial court's verdict. I'm not talking of appeals now because appeal may take another 5 years, 10 years, etc., which needs to be corrected also. But I'm more concerned for the present about the longevity of investigation and trial. Criminal trials must wind up, even if the accused is on bail, within a few months or years. We must have, you see, suppose now Hathras, for last 4 days we are hearing such a serious crime has been committed in UP. There have been several similar cases. The whole nation's conscience is rocked. Nirbhaya's case was there, Harushi's case was there. Number of such criminal offenses in the last 10 years we see. We find that, well, a lot of interest was generated by media, and people also believe that, yes, we must get to the bottom of truth. Even today, Sushant's death also is creating a lot of furor. Let me tell you that without identifying a case by name, as a system, as our method in criminal law, I am saying that expeditious disposal of criminal matters would be a great service to our society and also to both the victim of the crime and to the suspect who has committed. A person who has not committed the crime, and if the sword keeps on hanging over his head for years together, it's a grave injustice to him. He is also presumably innocent person and he enjoys all the constitutional rights which are given to you and me. And therefore, pendency of a criminal case is also a stigma in our society. I would talk about people who are languishing in prison. Our experience has been very bitter on that. You see, as the Parliamentary Standing Committee, we visited a few prisons and we found that regrettably, the prisons are crowded by under trial prisoners in a very large number. In every prison, when we went to some couple of prisons in some states, we found that if total number of prisoners in a small prison is 92, 78 under trial prisoners and just 14 or 18 convicts. Well, this reflects very poorly. Under trial prisoners must be minimal. And for that, of course, the law of bail needs to be examined again. Of course, Supreme Court has been taking cognizance of this from time to time over the years. We have seen Husainara Khatun's case in 70s and thereafter number of cases through emerging from PILs that the courts have believed that if an accused has spent half the period of what he would be ultimately punished for, he should be enlarged on bail without examining the merits of the case. I would suggest that bail petitions also in our courts are kept pending regrettably, very unfortunately, for fairly long time. My own experience is that I have seen that even in the High Court, the bail petitions are kept pending for months for want of time. In lower courts also, bail petitions are kept pending for several weeks and months. I think this practice has to be terminated somehow. And for that, I have made a suggestion in the Parliament also, which is being examined, but it has not taken shape of law as yet. And I think the current and the future members who are concerned with the criminal justice system would examine this, that bail applications must be bound by a law, should be disposed of within a certain period of time. And I had suggested that if a bail petition is moved by a person from prison, from the date of registration of bail petition, a time-bound disposal of that bail petition has to be a piece of law, say 6 weeks or 8 weeks on the highest. If the administration of justice is unable to dispose of that bail application for offences which are not punishable, particularly for death or imprisonment for life, such petitions must be disposed of in a matter of 6 weeks or so. And if the administration or the prosecution is unable to do that for no fault of accused who has applied for bail, interim bail should be granted till the matter is heard. I think this can be examined, and this would certainly undo lots of evils which are otherwise existing. Well, I'm not trying to ensure that those who have committed crime should be left out so that they can commit crime. Of course, subject to our usual conditions for grant or otherwise of bail. One very important thing which I would wish to share with you is that all presiding officers, particularly in courts below, either it is magistrate's court or a district judge's court, they must understand that when a bail petition is being presented before them, the question he should keep in mind is not whether to grant bail or not. The question before him should be whether he should allow continuation of infringement of personal liberty or not at the instance of the state for the accusation. He should understand that keeping this man in custody, whether that is justified or not granting bail, because to grant bail is rule, as Justice Iyer said. Bail is rule, custody is exception. So the presiding officer should be a little more liberal with regard to consideration of question of bail or custody. Well, there are a number of settled conditions that are required to be applied by factors to be applied in mind before grant of bail. Let the person not misuse his bail. Let the offense be not committed again. Let him not escape clutches of law. Let him not become scarce. Let him not interfere in the course of administration of trial, etc., etc. Those things are to be borne in mind. But let me tell you that finding truth by a judge is a very august job. He should understand this as a virtue. You know, he is as though considered as a demigod. He would decide the fate of certain people before him. Now, it should not happen that, well, in a criminal trial, the learned judge is mechanically recording evidence and is only coming to some kind of 2 + 2 is 4. It is not so as far as recording of evidence and forming opinion with regard to the guilt or otherwise of the people before him. Please remember, Supreme Court has gone on record having said, Supreme Court has told magistrates and district judges, don't surrender your glory to us. We are not as well placed as you are, because you are having the opportunity of examining the witnesses, seeing the witnesses, recording the evidence. You are seeing the people who want to pour out truth to you in order that you get to the bottom of truth, and you are much better placed than we as appellate courts, because we are guided by the material that is brought to us and we don't go beyond that generally. And therefore, you are in a more important position than us. I think this is not understood by the magistrates and judges who are conducting trials day in and day out and deciding cases. At the bottom, if the investigation is not honestly done, if the investigation is not pursuit of truth, then the trial cannot end up in doing justice. And if the trial does not end up in doing justice, no appellate court can undo the whole thing. So if you want to meet the ends of justice, if you want to arrive at truth and ensure that, well, no miscarriage has taken place, in that event, you have to start from the investigation level and the trial court level. Appellate courts have very limited role to play, because appellate courts, 95 to 98%, are only guided by the evidence. In exceptional cases, the appellate courts are saying that let us have a retrial or let us have re-recording of evidence, etc., etc. Otherwise, justice suffers. And many times we have come across instances that if blunders are committed by the trial court or by the investigating officers, justice has suffered. In many cases, the matters don't land up in appeal courts. So we succumb to miscarriage of justice at the lower stage. I think we need to minimize this also. Many things are required to be done for reforming our police system, our prison system, our trial system, training to the learned judges, training to the investigating officers. They should be given to understand how important is their role in a civil society, because liberty cannot be protected. And it is for the citizens, lawyers in particular, who are the torchbearers of the society. Lawyers have to ensure, and the people themselves have to ensure, as learned hand rightly says, that liberty lies in the hearts of men and women. When it dies there, no constitution, no law, no court can save it. No constitution, no law, no court can even do much to help it. The whole exercise, right from the date of commission of crime till the verdict of the trial court, is a quest for truth. And how do we arrive at truth? And for learned judges, I must send a message and say that, remember, your august duty is to separate truth from untruth, because people come, they don't always tell truth. Even if oath is administered, witnesses with impunity keep on speaking falsehood. It is for the learned judge to look into the eyes of the witness, not just the cross-examiner, the defense lawyer. It is, of course, defense lawyer's professional duty to see that he can extract truth from a false liar witness. But it is also equally the duty of the learned judge, who has to ultimately do justice, not the defense counsel. So he has to see that how does he identify truth. And for judges, remember, there is one very important Chinese quote, which I would say for you, tell you of a benefit, that falsehood has the tendency to gallop with lightning pace. I repeat, falsehood has the tendency to gallop with lightning pace, covering half the distance to its destination even before truth ties its laces. So the learned judge must understand that falsehood brought to him, you see, will be very appealing. Falsehood brought to him will attract him. Falsehood would move with rapid speed, and truth may be somewhere behind. So it is your duty, your important duty, to trace that truth. And then, unless you can identify truth, you can never do justice. So your endeavor, or you have to embark upon quest for truth, and it is only after you are identifying the truth that you can do justice, both to the offenders as well as to the people who have committed the crime. I think in our system, we need many reforms, like protection of witnesses, like legal aid system, like expeditious trial, inadequacy of judges, incompetency of learned prosecutors. Because I have experienced that, unfortunately, a prosecutor on an average is unable to match the wit of the defense counsel. And the defense counsel are much more looked after. The prosecution department has to gear up to match with the top defense counsel, who can manipulate and influence the learned judge to even see that a guilty person escapes punishment. And if a guilty person escapes punishment, it's a blow to a civil society. And therefore, as we say that if the wrongdoer, if the innocent person should not be punished, equal responsibility of the learned judge and people concerned with the system is to see that offender does not escape punishment. I think I would now invite, if in case there are any queries from any of our friends. And
thank you, Majeed Memon, sir. Justice V. Ramkumar, sir, today is our 130th session. Your comments on the presentation and also on the occasion, please, sir.
I'm sorry, a little louder, please, your voice.
Sir, today is our 130th session. So
I know that. Yes, I am aware.
I was just requesting Justice V. Ramkumar for his comments and also to initiate the discussion. Ramkumar, sir.
Yes.
Pardon, sir. Please repeat.
Justice Ramkumar, sir, please.
Yes. It was an excellent articulation by Mr. Majeed Memon. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. I am hearing you. I am grateful, sir. Please.
Okay. Now you made a very good talk on trial by media. You are absolutely right. The media is exceeding all limits. In fact, while even before the trial court or the appellate court, the presumption of innocence and benefit of doubt are very valuable rights available to the accused. Unfortunately, these rights are thrown to the winds by media. A person, whenever an FIR is registered against a person, we find in various channels after 10:30 p.m. in most of the channels, we find certain very sensational headings, crime story or charge sheet, etc. And when the moment an FIR is registered against a person, he is described as the most despicable person. Without knowing that he has got the benefit of the presumption of innocence. He is insulated by the presumption of innocence, and media has no concern for that. Ultimately, if by the time the case comes up for trial, the media might have convicted him, and the entire in the public mind. And if the court, for want of legal evidence, were to acquit the person, even motives are attributed to the judge. Corrupt motives are attributed to the judge. Oh, he might have taken money because we had brought every aspect before the media. I don't think that is the duty of the media. The media can collect evidence, nothing wrong. They can collect evidence and hand it over to the police. If they have no faith in the police, they can hand it over to the court.
Exactly. Now, sir, may I just add to what you have said? I most heartily welcome your suggestions, and I am in fact equally pained because I think this itself is a very big subject, what you have said now. And I would request some of our friends from your bar. I believe that Kerala is a very leading bar, and where very conscientious lawyers are there. And I would suggest that if any one of you, if you can suggest someone who can file a PIL on this point, that the courts have to respecting the rights of media. Well, of course, we are not curtailing the freedom of expression. We are, please don't misunderstand us. We must tell the courts when you approach through PIL that we are not the least curtailing the rights of media to project truth and serve the society. They are doing good job, but where they err, that error needs to be eliminated, and that error is very easily identifiable. For example, as if we tell you that after FIR is registered and the investigation begins, the statements of witnesses are not accessible. The statement and the reports are not accessible to the people and even to the accused or his counsel, as we know, till the challan is filed. But you see, we are seeing every day particular television channels, with pride they announce that we have access, first access to the statement of this witness. We have first access to this medical report. We have first access to this particular document, which is making a farce of a criminal trial. If this defense is taken later, for example, in a case like this, just imagine that tomorrow when the trial will take place, and I will be the counsel for the defense, I would tell the court that, sir, this trial is vitiated. This is not a fair procedure established by law as guaranteed under Article 21, because there is a lot of, you see, manipulation, you see, and great disservice is done to the investigation also and to the investigating agency also. I will tell you how. Because if you reveal the first statement, the following statements that would have come, you know, would be changed, because it is known now that X has said something, so Y knows and Z also knows that, well, this is the statement of X, which should have been kept guarded secret. But unfortunately, investigating agencies themselves probably leak such statements. So officers who are guilty of leaking investigating material during the independency of investigation to media must be punished, must be identified and punished. And media is at the receiving end. Media is tempting them to give it so that we publicize you. Everybody is craving for publicity. But at what cost? At the cost of a fair procedure established by law assured under Article 21.
You are absolutely right. In fact, when even the investigating officer is prohibited from leaking out the details of investigation to the public, including media, here is a media which publishes whatever they have collected, legal or illegal, whatever they have collected to the entire public, running into lakhs, millions, the world over.
You are right.
And what should I say, indoctrinating the public to a particular view.
Yes,
And
yes.
ultimately, when the trial court acquits the accused for want of legal evidence as per Evidence Act, even motives are attributed to the judge. He
Exactly.
might have taken money, otherwise we had brought everything. According to me, the role of the media, of course, they can collect evidence if they have no faith
But
in
they
the
must,
investigating agency.
but they must
They must
understand.
keep it secret, and
Ah,
they must hand over whatever they have collected either to
correct.
the investigating agency
Absolutely right, sir.
at the,
Absolutely
at,
right.
at the end of the investigation. If they have no
Media,
faith, or if they
yes.
have no faith in the investigating
Sir,
agency,
media can be a useful source for collecting evidence, but that has
exact,
to be poured into the bag of investigating officer rather
yes,
than displaying it to the public.
public.
Correct.
But that is not media's intention. Media's intention
No,
is
no.
to win
They,
TRP.
they, they want
They
to take the
create
credit.
sensation.
Yes, yes,
We must stop
exactly,
this
exactly.
because
And
a suspect, an innocent suspect, or a celebrity, or a
yes,
politician, or a person who has earned good name over the years,
yes,
his name is lost within overnight. In 2 days,
yes, yes,
media can malign anybody to any extent.
yes.
This is very unfortunate. This is not.
We had a tragic incident day before yesterday, sir. One of the orthopedicians in Kerala committed suicide because negligence was attributed, and the social media and the media took upon as if he is some sort of a grave convict or something. He committed suicide. That's also happening, sir.
I am sorry to tell you and share with you if I would experience my own, observations in the last several years. There was a case where a gentleman was arrested for wrong thing. Absolutely, he was innocent. His sons came to me and said that if my father is not released, he has been sent to prison for night, and if he remains in custody till sun rises, his daughter-in-law will commit suicide, his wife will commit suicide. So you have to see that in midnight he should be released because he has committed no wrong. What kind of a system do we have? And I had to run throughout the night, and at 2 a.m. I got him released because he had not committed any crime. But these things are very exceptional. They don't happen.
Exactly. Yes.
Generally, as you rightly say, that one who is falsely involved, may commit suicide, or one who has been falsely involved may suffer
Implicated.
immensely. Irreparable loss can be caused to him. So where is justice? So this is grave miscarriage of justice.
Exactly. Exactly. And I would even say that if the media people have no faith in the investigating officer, or they say they have a view that the investigating officer is hand in glove with the culprits,
Culprits.
etc. They can tell the investigating officer, see, this is what we have collected. We have retained a copy with us. In case you don't publish this, you don't give it to the court ultimately along with the charge sheet.
Sir, I'm sorry to interrupt you. The remedy lies that if an IO, who may be of the rank of inspector or sub-inspector or whatever it is
Yes,
not doing his duty, there are
yes,
ways and means to take corrective steps. Number one, go to his superior, go to the assistant commissioner or to the commissioner or to the DGP or anybody. If you are
yes,
not satisfied with the entire police force, go to the concerned magistrate who is having jurisdiction over that police
exactly.
station. Make an application to that magistrate and say that, sir, this is the position. Even there is a
Yes,
provision under 156(3) if 154 is not resorted to. You see, if FIR is not registered, you can't go to media and start making all kinds of noise. You go to the
exactly.
magistrate.
Exactly.
There is a
Yes,
system in place, but people are not
yes,
educated to do the proper thing.
yes. See, this is our 130th webinar lecture. You had regaled us through the 130th webinar lecture. The past speakers on this platform constitute a heterogeneous mix consisting of sitting and former judges of the Supreme Court of India and various high courts, senior and junior advocates of the Supreme Court of India in various high courts, then solicitors, academicians from India and abroad, district and sessions judges, debt recovery tribunal judges, advocate general, even an advocate general addressed us, and public prosecutors, experts including medical professionals and forensic surgeons, electrical engineer, even in one lecture, an electrical engineer of the KCB had addressed us, and then directors of various judicial academies, and law professors, cyber experts, a life and business coach, a great archaeologist addressed us, who had a great role to play in the Ramajanma Bhoomi place. The journalists, NHRC members, judicial members of NCLT, such other many more persons had addressed in this platform. That is how we have come to the 130th lecture. And you have what should I say? You have elucidated our knowledge through such basic fundamentals of criminal justice. And see, our heads are swollen, not because of any hydrocephalus, but because of transfer of knowledge.
No, I would also just add one more thing, since you have touched the subject, that
Yes.
see, trial judges must understand their duty. As I said, that Supreme Court having said that don't surrender your glory to us. No, you
Yes.
are a better place than us. We are
Yes.
maybe in a very high position, but you have privilege of seeing the trial and the conduct of trial. Now, let me
Yes.
tell you that, see, there are cases we come across that recently, I would not name, but recently a very important case in which 90% witnesses turned hostile. You see.
Yes.
Suppose 50 witnesses are examined in a double murder case or triple murder case. Out of 50 witnesses, 46 witnesses have turned hostile. Now, is this not a mockery of a trial? What I said when I was asked to opine, of course, media was asking my opinion. So I said, look here, when a learned judge is sitting there, he is not sitting there as a computer. He is not sitting there as a machine. He is a
Mute
human
spectator.
being, and
Not a mute.
he is not just a person as a spectator, as you rightly said. Now, when the first witness comes in, eyewitness comes and gives a go-by to the prosecution story, well, he may note it down that, well, this witness is an eyewitness according to the papers, but he has not supported prosecution witness. Come on, bring second witness. He tells the prosecutor, the investigating officer brings second witness. Second witness also completes go-by. Third, fourth, fifth. The judge has to stop then. Judge can't go on to 46. You see, on fourth or fifth witness, he would call the IO and he will address the prosecutor that, look here, I don't find that this is a quest for truth, which I am conducting, because I find total departure from the original case, upside down. And I can't believe that what I am doing is a service to law or justice. So I would want you to please ask the investigating officer to step into box, and he should be cross-examined now as to why it is so happening that witnesses are telling something absolutely in the other way as what you have brought before me, the court. And then we must proceed. Stop it here. No point in having 40, 50 witnesses all hostile and then giving a judgment on that. This is fun. People are laughing at us. Those who do not belong to administration of justice, when they read such judgments and they find, we make ourselves as a laughing stock. What kind of a criminal trial goes on if all the witnesses are hostile and then the judgment is delivered?
Yes.
This needs that. And then secondly, if there are cases where all accused are innocent and offenders are not brought before me, so is the judge that helpless? What has the judge done in the trial? You see, the duty of the judge is to resort to the provisions under the code, tell the prosecutor and the investigating officer, summon those who appear to have been involved in the crime. This is also not happening. In important matters, if our justice system works this way, people are bound to lose faith. Yes. And their confidence in our system is gradually eroding. What will happen tomorrow for our next generation? We have to stand firm. You see, we must make sure that everybody believes that, yes, we have a strong justice system in place and that no one who commits crime would escape.
Correct, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. I think
Sir, can we take a couple of questions, sir? We have Vijay, please. Vijay, go ahead.
Yes.
No, I've got nothing. It's a privilege to hear the senior counsel, Mr. Majeed Memon. Thank you, sir. And media, the role you have highlighted is absolutely fabulous. It's a lesson for all of us to understand what kind of role this media is playing around. And only thing what I doubt, I don't practice much on criminal law, is that the bail orders which are being given, especially by the High Court, they are running into more than 1 or 2 pages, which is, we find it difficult whether it's a bail or a trial. So So
Actually,
something needs to be done where earlier days there used to be 1 or 2 paragraphs because it's only a subject to satisfaction of a presiding officer.
you are right.
But that is taking the whole day. Bails are itself taking the entire day for adjudication in a court.
That's right. You see, exactly. You see, the whole spirit of the provisions of bail, as I said, that while considering the question of bail, invariably thousands of judges throughout the country from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, they are just thinking that the man is brought before me, whether I should release him or not, whether I should grant him a yes, prosecutor. Not the question is whether I should continue to legitimize detention or not. That's the question. Please understand the difference. You see, a man is seeking restoration of liberty because his personal liberty has been infringed upon. He is presumably innocent, is brought before me. So my duty is not to see whether bail should be granted to him or not. He is entitled to bail. Unless otherwise, you are...
And only question is whether he will be available for trial.
Absolutely. And mind you, don't forget that refusal of bail is no part of punishment. You see, there are people who are on bail and get convicted. There are people who are denied bail and are acquitted. So therefore, bail or no bail has nothing to do with the merits ultimately of whether the man has committed the crime or not. As you rightly say, that there are other considerations. If you are a hazard to the society, or if you are going to run away, or if you are going to commit similar crime, or if you are going to destroy evidence, or if there is satisfactory evidence to that, not just outward, ostensible, imaginary allegations that the prosecution may always say, you have to test that. If it is not there, then he is entitled to bail.
Thank you, sir.
Correct,
Thank
sir.
you.
Sir, we are conscious of the fact that time is a constraint, but still, I think we may rush through one more question.
Please, I don't mind.
Nawaz Jan, can you put the question first?
Okay. First of all, thank you very much, sir, for having presented such a most relevant topic in a most beautiful and effective manner. And we are blessed that in addition to being a legal luminary, you are part of the legislature as well. Sir, my question is regarding 157 clause 1 of CRPC, where even if an FIR is lodged, even if an information is given to the police, it says that the officer in charge of the police station, if he has reasons to suspect the commission of an offense, sir, is not possible that this particular provision is being misused by the police officers many times. Because if the police officer is certain that the complainant has come against a very big shot, so he may not proceed to the scene of crime. He will say, I have no reasons to suspect. So is there any mechanism to overcome that? And second, sir, one more small question, sir. You have emphasized that bail is rule and custody is an exception. This is absolutely true, sir. But in reality, what is happening is magistrates usually act upon the reports of the prosecutor. And the prosecutor who stands for the state doesn't care to see whether there is truth in it or not. And prosecutor acts on the report of the police. And police acts just because of the reasons to believe aspect. Now the thing is that here the accused is not getting the benefit of doubt. As Justice Ramkumar has rightly pointed out, the presumption of innocence is not allowed to be availed by the accused. So these are the two questions on which if you could kindly throw light on this.
No, see, I must tell you that over the years, and even if you look at Justice Iyer's observations in a number of criminal matters, Balchand's case, prosecutor's case, a number, even in the case of Nandini Satpathy, Justice Krishna Iyer has delivered several such cases where, and many other learned judges of the Supreme Court have time and again said that we don't trust our police, you see. And the fact that the police are not to be trusted, that is why we have a check of judicial mind. And you know, it has also been recommended in various commission reports and various judgments that the investigation and prosecution are to be slightly two different compartments. Investigating officer, out of his zealousness, may try the try to influence the court by believing that what he has said is truth and therefore follow that. But the prosecutor is a slightly different person. A prosecutor must not mingle with the investigating agency. The prosecutor must understand that he is an independent organ, independent part of the trial. And he need not always be guided by investigating officers. It requires a very strong prosecutor, but unfortunately we are not getting such prosecutors. And what you said is that the considerations for the investigating officer, who are of a low rank, are too many other than which I would call it extra legal. You see, there are too many temptations. There are too many other influencing factors which are working with the investigating officer. But remember that in any particular case, if any person is aggrieved, maybe particularly a suspect, he could always see to it that if the investigating officer has done something which is not correct, then there is a mechanism by which you can challenge that. Even you need not wait till the trial. You need not wait. At the investigation stage itself, you have a magistrate, judicial magistrate, before whom, you see, what is the purpose of extension of remand under 167? The spirit of that provision is that there is a judicial scrutiny over progress of investigation. Unfortunately, it's not happening. When a person is brought before the court today, 5 days remand I have given as a magistrate. After 5 days, when I'm brought again, mechanically, they will say, sir, investigation is going on, grant further remand, I would remand, grant. That is not correct. My duty is that if I have legitimized encroachment of the liberty of a man produced before me 5 days ago, the same situation doesn't exist today again. I have to see that in last 5 days, what happened? Bring case diary. I will go through the step-by-step movement of the investigation, and I would see whether my order of 5 days ago would be again extended, or I must revoke that order if I have appreciation for personal liberty, which is not happening, unfortunately. Magistrates, do they do this job? Every time when the second remand is taken, it is the duty of the magistrate to ask that what is the change in circumstance from first remand to second remand? What further material have you brought to deprive bail to this man today? Nothing happens of that kind. So therefore, police officers are to be handled very carefully, both by the learned lawyers and also by the judges.
Correct, sir. Thank you. Sir, Ampika would like to put a question to you, sir. Speak up, please.
Thank you, sir. Sir, you mentioned about under trials and also about cases of custodial violence, manipulated investigation.
Pardon?
Ampika, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Sir, am I audible?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes.
Hello?
Yeah,
Okay,
please
sir. So you mentioned about those cases that are faced by the issues that are faced by the accused. But then on the other hand, there are instances where the victims struggle to have their cases registered, investigated, or tried. So this difficulty of accessing the legal system often dissuades them to seek out justice. So what do you think the Indian judicial system should do about it?
Now remember, I have already explained this, but I will do it again for your benefit, because your pointed question is that if the victim does not get justice after commission of the crime, suppose today the crime is committed, the victim is ignored by the police officers for whatever reasons. Maybe that the offender is a very powerful person or for any other reason. In that event, if the police officer, you have to go to police station and go to the duty officer and give a complaint. If he is not taking a complaint, you have first remedy is to put a written complaint, file it and take acknowledgement. Second remedy is that, of course, if written complaint also doesn't work, you can go to his superior, the in charge of the police station, or assistant commissioner of police who would be there, or even a deputy commissioner of, there is a rank after rank. You go to the higher, and yes, hierarchy is there. Now, if assuming that you are not getting justice from anyone from the policeman, then go to the magistrate who has jurisdiction over that police station. Make an application to that court. And I think there should be no difficulty in magistrate dealing with your grievances appropriately.
Okay, sir, thank you.
Thank you. KVJ Rao sir, can you make it fast so that we can wind up?
Memon sir, thank you very much. Very inspiring and educating lecture. Sir, with regarding to media, if I'm sitting here talking to you today, it is only thanks to the media. Had the media not exposed what has done to me, I wouldn't be sitting in front of you. I'd still be languishing in Arthur Road jail.
Oh, I see.
Okay, because the media took it up, half the charges against us were dropped, and this is a section 66A case, which went right up to the Supreme Court, and Honorable Supreme Court turned it down. So it is a double-edged sword. I totally agree with you. What is happening in the media today is actually infringing onto the thing. During my time, it was not like that. They just mentioned what were the charges and whether they were applicable or not applicable in the given circumstances. That's number one. Number two is, the problem with the people to approach a police station is, from childhood we have been taught that the police is to be scared. You cannot trust the police. So nobody wants to go to the police, and the policemen do take advantage of that. And that puts the citizens at a very big disadvantage. Like for me, even today, I'm facing trial. But the fact is, the case doesn't come up. When it comes up, the public prosecutor doesn't want to argue because they know they don't have a case. The Joint Commissioner told the police that, you all have forged documents to arrest this man. What are you all doing? You all will get caught, if not today, tomorrow. It is greatness of the Joint Commissioner. Otherwise, like I said, otherwise I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you, sir.
Sir, I endorse what you say, and I must tell you that my endeavor and my all efforts are not to shut down media or to ask media to shut up. No, I am not doing so. What I am saying is that media needs to be regulated.
There has to be a threshold.
Media has to be informed that, look here, this is the line. Please don't cross that. Beyond that, you are doing disservice.
I totally
Otherwise,
agree.
up to this line, you agree, and you are doing great service, no doubt. Without media, a civil society cannot exist. Now, about police people, I will give you one instance in 2 minutes. I was appearing for Anna Hazare before the division bench in Bombay High Court. It was a fight, a PIL for fighting corruption. And I recall my address, when it was a division bench headed by the Chief Justice, then Chief Justice, he became Supreme Court judge thereafter. And I am glad to say that he remembers my submissions even now. I think 25 years have passed on. When he met me outside, now he's no more, he's an ex-Supreme Court judge. He was telling me, Mr. Memon, you remember Anna Hazare's petition you had argued. I will repeat it for the benefit of my listeners here today, that I had said the same thing. It was a whole packed, crowded High Court, Bombay High Court, and it was of great media interest also, and all full of media people also. Anna Hazare was standing behind me, barefoot. And I was telling the court that, sir, we are fighting corruption. I have nothing personal. I am here for the service of the society. I am a man who has no roof over my head. I am sleeping in a temple. I have no footwear. You see, I am here barefoot. And I am running a small office to fight corruption in police force and in corporation. We have a small office, and people keep on coming to us. One clerk is sitting there, and they, from that slum area in Mumbai, people come and tell us every day, this is my problem, this is my problem. So that man directs them to police station or to BMC office. So when the man goes to police station, he comes back and says, see, I went up to police station, but when I saw from outside, I was scared and I came back. I told the learned Chief Justice, and why did he come back? Why did he not step in? When he's a citizen of India and the law is with him, why did he not muster enough courage to go inside the police station? The answer is that, well, he's scared of the policeman. That fellow will abuse him. He will ill-treat him, or he may even detain him. So I said, no, sir, I'm not going. So, sir, the whole system is affecting the poor people. I would want you to intervene in this PIL and change the situation to the extent that such a helpless man goes to the police station without fear, enters, the officer sitting there receives him, welcomes him with a smile, offers him a glass of water, if not a cup of tea, hears him patiently, and the man is at least satisfied that, yes, I have heard, there is somebody who can hear and solve my problem, and comes back happily. On that day, when such a man will come back, we'll put a padlock in our office and we'll say, we have done our job. Can you do that? I asked the Chief Justice. He was, taken aback. He said, yes, it was emotional. So this is how people have got psychological fear with the policemen. The policemen need to be trained that you have to be very humane. You must understand that nobody wants to come to, why people are going away. You see, one example I gave is that for collecting Ganesh Utsav Chanda donation, you see, some boys go, so they go from place to place and they skip police station. Because don't go there. Why? They should go there, and the police officers must very...
Raman, I would like to ask a doubt.
So this psychology, you see, about the policeman being very crude, very harsh, very dangerous, you see, must go. We have to all work together. The whole civil society has to work for it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Sir,
Thank
we
you,
have
sir.
Mr. Raman. Please, sir, unmute yourself.
Welcome.
That will be the last question we'll be taking today.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
please. Unmute yourself. Yeah, please.
May I ask a doubt, sir?
Please.
I'm Raman, advocate in the High Court of Kerala, sir. I heard you, sir. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible, but there's no light, it seems. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it is better now.
Am I visible now?
Yeah,
sir?
yeah, you are visible as well as audible. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I heard you speaking about so much about the police, about the executive, the police, which is a part of executive. Sir?
Yes.
And I also heard yourself and Mr. Justice Ramkumar coming heavily down upon media when they are doing the trial and all. Media trials and all, sir. Now, the whole thing, the whole reason for all this is, according to me, sir, because people, the populace, the ordinary people of this country is not just fed up of one system of this thing, but the whole system of democracy itself. Sir, am I audible, sir?
Yeah, please carry on, carry on.
Yes. Democracy consists of, they say, legislature, then judiciary, and executive. Police is part of the executive, and judiciary is part of, judges and high courts are part of judiciary. And legislature is composed of people who are elected representatives of the people. Am I right, sir?
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
And now, the ordinary people are not able to understand this kind of technicality that is being carried out, or rather, that is being adopted by all these sub branches of the government. Government consists of all these three, this thing. And also, sir?
Yeah, you are audible.
Yeah, please.
Carry on.
Yeah, please come to please ask the question.
The question is, learned people or philosophers have said that media is the fifth pillar, or the fourth pillar of this thing, of democracy. Fourth estate means fourth pillar too, according to me, sir. They are also I would humbly submit, I would humbly say that they are also part of democracy. Fourth estate, which is
Nobody doubts.
nobody doubts that. And according to the ordinary people who are large in this country, they have ultimately found that the media in most of the cases comes out with the real facts. So
How do you know?
because judiciary, executive, every other branch is functioning on technicality. So this technicality is devoid in, or rather is absent in the fourth pillar, which is media. Media in most of the cases have come out with the truth. That is why, sir.
Yeah, carry on.
Now, I think I have understood what you mean to say. Now,
Yes,
please eliminate from your mind that me or justice are against media. We are not against media at all. We would consider the importance of fourth pillar of democracy, but media needs to be regulated. Media needs to be educated. Media needs to be informed as to where is Lakshman Resha. You are doing a great job to such people.
Sir.
You know, if a weak citizen is let down by executive, legislature, and judiciary, then media can stand up for that person and see to it that justice is delivered to that person. That is true. But media must know act in a disciplined manner within its circuit. It could not cross Lakshman Rekha, and it should not damage criminal investigation. That's our that's all.
So what I am saying is that you and Justice Ramkumar being extremely wedded to technicality, which is sir.
Yeah, of course. Go ahead, please.
What I am saying is that you and Justice Ramkumar and various other High Court judges as well as Supreme Court judges, unfortunately being extremely wedded to technicality, are not able to understand or see
we are
the
aware. We are aware of the role played by media in bringing to light so many cases. But they, as rightly said by Mr. Memon, we have to cross a, we have to draw a line. Beyond that, they are not expected to go.
Ramkumar sir, if I can just Raman sir, if you just take, let us take Kerala. Take 5 newspapers: Deshabhimani, Madhrubhumi, Manorama, Veekshanam, same news in 5 colors, and you say which is truth?
You cannot say.
Yeah,
but
same thing. So if somebody is wedded to technicalities, these persons have sold their soul to someone else. So both has to be taken with a pinch of salt. We'll try to revamp the system. Let us see. So
can you, Shyampadman sir?
Yes.
Can you also, by keeping your hand on your chest, can you openly say that what is being administered by way of justice in this country is 100% truth?
Raman sir, I can only say one thing: justice to me may not be justice to you. And you are entitled to your opinion. I am entitled to my opinion. Let us exchange opinions and let us not pass any judgments.
Anyway, let us not be offensive of the views of our friend, gentlemen. I respect your views, but I must tell you that today somebody has sarcastically told me, and I am sharing it with you, something very important, that till now we are having a system where witnesses are asked to touch, you see, holy book and say, take oath before. I think oath is required to be given to investigating officers, and the oath is required to be given to the learned trial judges also. This is what people are saying today. So,
absolutely. Absolutely.
May
so,
I?
Yeah.
Yes.
May I say one more thing, sir?
Yes.
As Karl Marx, as Honorable Karl Marx has said, now we have come to a time where even people, everybody is fed up of this democracy also. Now we have to evolve a new system of government, which consists of, as you say, as we all understand, judiciary, legislative, executive, and also the fourth estate, which is the media. That also will have to be included, and a new system will have to be evolved. That's all what I'm saying, sir.
Very true. I agree.
Thank you, Raman, sir. With due apologies to Mr. Ravi, Praveen Kumar, Raman, Anil, etc., so that we are running short of time. We are not taking those questions. May I just request Prem to wind up? Please, Prem.
Well, sir, that was an erudite, enlightening encapsulation of such a huge, broad topic. I just have a very small question for you, sir, because this is having direct connection with the investigation. Of course, we first had an argument that there is no provision in the CRPC which would allow a magistrate to monitor the investigation, and that was debunked by Sakiri Vasu's case, Justice Markande Kaju in 2008. Now, 2009, you have a judgment in Nirmal Singh Karlan by His Lordship Justice S.B. Sinha, who would doubt the powers which are granted by Sakiri Vasu. Of course, the same Justice Sinha in Kishan Lal, of course, another 2009 ruling, goes on to reiterate Sakiri Vasu. And by the 2011 Tangraj versus Engammar, Justice Patnaik, he also endorses to Sakiri Vasu. So right now we have co-equal benches of the Supreme Court. All these are 2-judge benches of the Supreme Court. Co-equal benches of the Supreme Court flip, flop, flip, flip on this particular facet. And this particular doubt, whether the magistrates have the power to monitor the investigation, that looms large due to this particular conflict in these decisions. What would be your take on this, sir?
Well, the law of precedent is very clear that if there are conflicting decisions of the highest court of equal number of judges, then the proper course is to
larger bench.
Go for a larger bench. And of
True.
course, that can always be done. But you see, I would feel that, well, and I have been repeatedly saying this wherever I get an opportunity to interact with even Supreme Court judges at times or with the lawmakers, I have been saying that it is a very important part of functioning of a learned judge, particularly judges of constitutional courts, that well, you are laying law. You see, you whatever judgment you pronounce would become precedent, and therefore you have to be very careful to see that what are the existing precedents on the same issue. And you must always be guided, or you should also take pains to find that if there are already some decisions on the same issue, which is almost identical, then in that event you should not depart. And if you are departing with equal of colleagues on the bench with you, then I think it would, with respect, I may say, highest respect to the learned court, I must say that it amounts to judicial impropriety or judicial indiscipline. And therefore, that needs to be corrected. So it is without taking offense. I think a larger bench can always set it right, and this has happened umpteen number of times, that the larger bench has pondered over both the verdicts and then settled the issue.
Here, quite astonishingly, same Justice Sinha, within a span of 3 months, in one judgment, he says that is, I am doubting that. After immediately thereafter, after 3 months, he goes on to reiterate what he said he doubted.
This is a comment personally against a particular judge, and I think I should refrain from saying anything, because otherwise we open a Pandora box. You see, there are a number of things which I could share with you, but not with today's subject. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Wisdom can dawn at any moment. Maybe after 3 months, wisdom dawn. That's another story. As a last question,
I just said it is conducive to clarity.
Anil, please.
Yeah. I'm all questions, sir. Thing is, I see many rulings from the court that saying that
I am not able to get you, Mr. Andrew. Please.
I could see many rulings from.
I'm not able to see you, nor am I able to hear you.
I'm not in a position to put on my camera. I was trying to put on my camera, but it's not getting on because I had to go to settings.
Okay, just put the question, please.
In that, I could any ruling from Supreme Court saying that an investigation officer during investigation should cover all possible area of possible area of offense, committal of offense. Means there should not be any lacuna like court. And since nowadays I could see many times that there are many lacunas in the investigation, and advocates like us is actually taking advantage of that lacuna to save our claims, right? But even before, actually the presiding officer, even before forming the charge, at least could understand there are many lacunas in this, or investigation officer also can make out from our arguments and the things. But I could never see that either presiding officer uses section 156(3) to repeat the investigation, or 173(8) by the investigation officer. Never see that. If they utilize such situations, they can even close up that particular lacuna in the investigation, and the trial can go smoothly without any lacuna in the investigation.
I'm sorry, if you can precisely formulate the question, that would be better.
Even in the CRPC itself.
Anil, can you just put it in the question form so that it could be addressed?
Correct. Why the presiding officer or investigation officer are not using that section as section 156(3) or 173 or 8? Okay, that's the thing. Because to close the lacuna in the charge sheet means the challan submitted, the investigation report. Because I have many cases now wherein I can make out that the investigation is not proper. So that lacuna advocate can utilize to save our party. That is okay. That is advantageous for us. But before forming this charge, at least the experienced presiding officer can understand that the investigation is not proper. There are many lacunas. At least he can order 153 for 156(3) for repeated investigation, or at least after forming the charge, investigation officer at any time utilize 173(8) for further investigation with the nod of the presiding officer of the court, so that you can close the lacuna. But I could never see such a repeated investigation or repeated filling up of lacunas. That's the reason why many culprit escapes.
No, see,
CRPC can be utilized. CRPC provision can be utilized
See, I must tell my friend that, look here, as far as winding up of investigation is concerned, it culminates into filing of challan under section 173, as you rightly pointed out. But if there is anything, of course, 173(8) is very often resorted to for further investigation, leave for further investigation, and the courts are liberal in allowing that in the interest of justice. And then, if at all, even after 173(8) exercise is over, and further additional charge sheet is filed before the court. In that event also, the learned presiding officer, that is the judge, has powers elsewhere under the code to call for further evidence. So there is nothing. What is the problem?
Nowadays, they are not doing it. They are keeping that particular investigation report till the end. And the advocates like us utilize that as such a lacuna to save our party accused.
Lacuna discovered by accused or by prosecution or by the court. There are three parties.
At least that 173(8), if you utilize, many of the lacuna can be covered. There may be many things further, but still the preliminary stage itself, the investigation report can be made at least complete, so that the vakil cannot, the judge means advocates will not get such a chance to save the culprits.
No. You see, you are entitled if you are talking from the point of view of the accused, or you are talking from the point of view of the prosecution, you are talking from the point of view of the court, because there are three parties before the court.
I am speaking for the prosecution, looking at the side.
No, prosecution is always permitted to apply for collecting fresh evidence, as I said, 173(8), or even thereafter, if the prosecution can satisfy the court that even after evidence is recorded, much after charge sheet is filed, the court will still ask for evidence.
Section 311.
Never I could see that provision is utilized in the court.
So that is not the fault of the system. That may be one particular court or two or more courts.
Exactly. It is the system that is not using it.
That's not the defect of the system.
Yeah, it is there in the system. It is not imposing, because the Supreme Court itself says the investigating officer should go all the directions of possible committal of offense. There are many rulings like that. All the possible directions they have to investigate, but still there are lacunas, and that is not covered by the existing system. That is why I am asking why it is so. There are many cases with me.
You may have to ask the judges.
Exactly.
For not exercising the power under 153.
Ramkumar sir, Anil sir, I think your complaint is regarding the investigating agency not doing it properly or filing a report without covering all the aspects, and should it not be pointed out the first instance?
Or the judges not exercising the power.
Correct.
Maybe the judges will have to exercise the power. They are not exercising. You can't say that the system is bad.
Did you see any time that after framing charges or evidence, this 173(8) is utilized many times?
Definitely, I have seen. In fact, I quoted 43 judgments of the Supreme Court to say that 173(8) power can be exercised.
Correct. That is there. That's why I'm asking. Our courts are not utilizing that such things.
Don't generalize. Don't generalize, Anil. Don't generalize. There are judges who exercise the power.
Correct.
There are judges who don't exercise the power.
I think we wind up.
Yes.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And as we come to the end of the 130th session, our thanks are due to Majeed Memon sir for sharing your valuable time and being part of this platform. We are indeed privileged to have your interaction with you, sir. And this is Ramkumar sir. Thank you for your valuable inputs and presence. And thank you all of you wonderful participants for making this today's session what the name itself suggests, legal empowerment through interaction lecture series. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
131st session will be next Friday. It will be on maintainability of suits by Vijay. Will be taking
all the best to all of you.
Next
Thank you.
Friday.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.